Hey guys, welcome back to the Steel City Roundtable. My name is Mark Nebo, and I will be your host for today. The attractive part of this team, Kelly, could not make it, so we're thinking about her. Can't wait till you come back next week. I am also joined, the return of JB, the technician.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Good to be here again.
How you been, John?
Good. Got baptized last weekend, so that was fantastic.
Yeah, how was that?
Oh my gosh, it was incredible.
Good for you, man.
Got baptized whenever I was a baby, but I pledged my faith publicly at 30 years old now, so it was fantastic. Made a speech in front of the church, so it was wonderful.
That's cool, awesome. Man. I got clean at 49, so, it's like it takes us a little while as knuckleheads, right?
Yeah.
But today, guys, we are joined by a super cool guy. I'm really excited that he's here today. There's a chiropractic practice located in the north side called 5 Points Chiropractic, and that is run and owned by Dr. Casey Phillips, who is to my left. How you doing, Casey?
Good to be here.
So, I've been a patient of Casey's off and on for about, 13 or 14 years. And I reached out to him, and he was grateful enough to come in and join us today. So let me ask you, Casey, why'd you come down?
Because you asked me to.
See, it works. If you ask, things happen. So let's get started. So you own 5 Points Chiropractic. Just talk about that a little bit.
Well, I established it 31 years ago this summer. And it's been an awesome ride. We've had some amazing patients. We've had some spectacular success stories with our patients. And it's a great practice. I actually have two. So I have an office in Bethel Park, as you know, and I have the Western Avenue office. And the Western Avenue office is like a melting pot. We have people of pretty much every ethnicity and religion and sexual orientation, and we have professionals, we have blue-collar workers, we take care of a ton of police officers, as you know, and it's just been a blessing. It's been a great ride.
Well, I remember when I met you, it was 2007, I was in the police academy, and you would come in and speak about, healthy living, taking care of your back, taking care of your posture, watching your diet, exercising. And, I was 33 at the time and probably in the best shape of my life when I met you. So I'm like, I don't need to listen to this guy, right? And then, fast forward a couple of years.
You're not the only one.
Fast forward a few years, I'm in there every week, with my back because, with officers, the duty belts really wear on police officers' joints and their backs and their skeletal system. So, so how did you come to the north side? Because you're not from north side, correct?
No, I was originally from the West End,
Okay.
And then my father bought a farm out in Washington County, and then I ended up back in Pennsylvania after I practiced in Florida. I was there for a year in 1991 and 92, and the story about how I ended up in the north side, do you have a minute?
I have a bunch.
Okay. It's a long story, but it's an interesting story.
We're all ears.
So my family came over on the Mayflower back in, no, I'm kidding.
I was going to say, wait a minute. Trying to do the math.
So I kind of have a story of my own, a recovery story. I was in a very, very dark place from 1982 until 1985. A series of personal tragedies took me down that dark path, and it wasn't good. Lost everything. And I had some good friends around me, though. Then they acted as a support system, and I was waiting for my best friend to get off of work in 1984 at Christmas time. And there was a woman standing there selling jewelry. The mall was about to close, and we were going to have an adult beverage. And I looked at her, and I looked away, and I looked back, and she had a very, very sad look on her face. She was considerably older than I. I was 22 at the time. And something just told me, go cheer this woman up. And I kept looking back. I wasn't saved then. It wasn't like God was talking to me saying, go cheer this woman up. So I approached her and I said, hello, how are you? Merry Christmas. And she said, Merry Christmas. And she said, can I help you? And I said, no, I'm just looking around. My friend came rolling up. And I said, meet our new friend. I said, what's your name? She said, Donna. I said, I'm Casey, and this is my friend JR. And she's like, nice to meet you. I said, Donna said she's going to go have a beer with us after work. And she said, well, I can't do that. And we were like, why not? And she said, why not? And she did. And as it turns out, her husband had just overdosed, and she had a 3-year-old and 5-year-old at the time. So she really needed a couple new friends. And to this day, she has remained the best of friends with us, and it's been almost 40 years. So we spent Christmas together, we hung out together, and I got toys for her kids and that. And then she came to my graduation from chiropractic school, and in 1992, I came back to Pittsburgh, and I was practicing with this fellow out in Bethel Park. And I was miserable because this guy was a criminal, and I hated being there. And a series of events happened that were absolutely extraordinary. I find it hard to believe to this day. I was broke and on my own, but I was practicing chiropractic. And I was clean. I made that decision to get clean when a chiropractor saved me from surgery in 1985. And I decided to become a chiropractor. I had to fire all of my friends because they were all living the life. So here I am, it's 1992, I'm clean, and I'm practicing, but I'm miserable. And this elderly woman asked me why I was working there. And I said, the banks won't lend me any money, and I need $30,000. She goes, if I lent it to you, what would you give me in return? And I paused and I said, well, I guess I could give you prime plus 2, that's what the bank wants. And I said I could give you 5% of the profits over the first 3 years if I make it. And she said, oh, you're gonna make it, kid. She called me kid. And the next week she presented me, she said, draw up the repayment schedule. And the next week she presented me a cashier's check for $30,000.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it.
That's amazing.
It blew me away. But this is where the story gets even crazier. My friend Donna, her newly minted stepmother, had a renovation company, and she was renovating Manchester. She's the one who launched the refit of the Manchester Victorian homes.
Okay.
And one day Donna calls me at the office, and she said, what do you know about shingles? I said, they go on your roof?
Which would probably be my response.
I remember it like yesterday. She goes, the disease ass. And so I explained it was a problem with the nerve root. Chicken pox infects the nerve roots, and it causes very painful rashes. She said, Joetta, my stepmother, has them, and she's had them for months, and she's ready to jump off a bridge. She can't take it anymore. Do you think you can help her? And I said, maybe. Bring her in. It's not going to hurt. And there's been some papers written, some people, getting results. Her shingles started to go away on the second visit.
Really?
The second visit. And she talked to me on the following visit, and she said to me, why are you working for this blankety blank? And I said, I was a captive audience until recently, but my financial fortunes have changed, and now I'm looking around for a place to set up a practice. She said, I want to buy you lunch. I said, I'd like that very much. She said, I have a cafe in the north side. I said, okay. And it was 4 doors down from where the practice is, on the end there. It was called Cafe Victoria. So we had a fine lunch, and she said, let's go for a walk. So we went out the front door, and as soon as we took a few steps, I saw the for sale sign in the front area there. She said, let's go inside. So you've been there. It's a gigantic building, and it was a hulk. I mean, plaster was falling out of the walls. It was a mess. But she had this construction crew, that was renovating all of these homes. She said, I'll make you a deal. She said, you come in and build out your partitions. I will have the place professionally painted. I'll have my drywall guys professionally do the walls. I'll have my electrician wire your x-ray machine at no cost, which would have cost thousands of dollars, three-phase electric and all that. She said, I'll rent you the first floor, and if in 3 years you're making a go of it, you agree to buy the building from me for fair market value. And at the time, it was the height of the crack and the gang epidemic. It was really bad. And people were being shot all over this area on a regular basis in 1993.
Wow.
It was really, really bad. And my girlfriend, I remember she was crying. She's like, please don't go. You're going to get killed. And I'm just like, by now I'm saved. I found the Lord in 1986, and I prayed about it. And I said, I think this is it. So of all places, Fox Chapel, McCandless, Upper St. Clair, all these different places that I could have gone, I ended up on Pittsburgh's north side. And that is how I ended up in the north side. But it gets even weirder than that, actually. I was on my couch in 1989, and I was still in school, and I got a telephone call that my estranged grandmother had passed and left some money. And when I called the bank, they said, it's to be divided between you and her other grandsons. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, I'm an only child. My mother was an only child. And the lady says, no, by her previous marriage. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean, what previous marriage? She goes, oh my God, hold on. And the branch manager gets on. And she says, Mr. Phillips, you have 3 brothers that live in a place called Northside, PA. It's near Pittsburgh.
You're kidding me.
That's ridiculous.
God is my witness.
Wow.
And so I called the executrix, and I'm like, what's going on? And she said, oh my God, you're alive, because I went off the grid. I went underground. She said, you have 3 brothers. The oldest one is a Pittsburgh City police officer. The second one is a Pittsburgh City fireman. And the third one works for Alcosan, the sanitary authority.
Yeah.
And so in the summer of '89, I came back and I met them, including my mother's first husband, whose name was Al Camino. And I'm like, you're kidding. And he was born 70 years before an El Camino was even thought of. But he turns out he was a master carpenter. And when I made the announcement that I was going to open up an office in Pittsburgh, he asked me if he could help me build it out. And he was 83 at the time. And I said, no. I said, Al, it's okay. I can manage. And he walked out of the room, and all the brothers said the same thing. You should let him do it. He'll work you under the table. And I'm like, I grew up on a cattle and horse farm. Nobody works me under the table. And the one day, I let him do it. We were there from 8 in the morning till 6 at night. And I said, let's wrap it up, Al. He said, no, you go ahead. Take it easy. I'm just going to. I said, okay. So I'm halfway to my car in the parking lot, and I stopped, and I looked up, and I went, the son of a bitch worked me under the table. And he wouldn't take a dime. He said, well, that's the way your mother would have wanted it. So that's my story of how I made it in the north side.
That is shock. The Lord had his hand on you, man.
First,
Got you exactly where you needed to go.
first comment is I knew that was coming from John.
Yep.
Amen.
But when you said you were saved, John's back there raising the roof because my man just got baptized, so he's all excited. So good for you. I have so many questions, but I wanted to interrupt you like 5 times. But I need to follow you around more often because you like have a shamrock stuffed up your ass. Because the way all these things planned out, like there's no way. So
How do you explain it?
you know with recovery that you are where you are because you're supposed to be there. You know,
Amen.
we don't have any control of what's going on. We just can control our thoughts and our actions. And, you know, I'm not a very religious person. I've said it numerous times on here. I believe in God. I believe in aspects, but I'm not like a practicing Christian. So for me, it's always been difficult to understand the giving yourself to God and to putting your faith in God. In the programs they call it a higher power. How did that journey come about for you to go from being, the 22-year-old kid who was just throwing his life away to finding your higher power?
Well, that's a story too. Unfortunately, none of Dr.
We
Casey's
do have to
stories
be
are
out of
short.
here by tomorrow.
I'll have us out of here by midnight. Well, I'll tell you, my journey left me with a very, very bad temper. A very isolated kid with an extremely bad temper who was living that life. But there was an individual who saw something in me, and her name was Lynn. And she kicked the door in until she got into my life. I wanted nothing to do with this woman or anybody else really outside of my partying circle, and only them because they were partiers.
Yeah, they were the acquaintances.
Yes, that you thought cared about you.
The people that you cut out when you get rid of the people, the places, and the things.
Amen. But I let her in, and I dropped the wall a bit. And one day, months after we had become acquainted, she presented me with this penny saver. And on the front page, it said, "Has your temper got the better of you?" And it had a little cartoon character, and his face was all squinched up. His hat had blown off his head. And his fists were clenched. And she said, "I think we should go to this." Well, I did not know that it was a church service. And I was like, I'm not staying. And she's like, "Please, let's just hear what he has to say." And that was what the sermon was on. It was about temperament and how when you commit to the Lord, he can bring about a peace and a love for you.
Amen.
Yeah. And he zeroed in on me because I was probably sitting like this, arms crossed, legs crossed, completely walled off. But he made a beeline to me after the service, and he asked me, he said, "What do you think?" And it turns out he was a minister in the Presbyterian Church of America. His name is John. I forget his last name. And I told him, I said, "Well, it's pretty cool." And he asked me if I'd come back because it was a series. And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." He said, "Promise me you'll come back." And I did. And it was a 3-part series. And so after the third one, he said, "I'd like to invite you to my house next week and have a Bible study after church." And I agreed. And so for the next few weeks, we had these studies. I'm going to have to keep it together to finish the story because it's insane. One day, we were talking about the nature of God. And I asked him, I said, "What do you think God actually looks like?" And he said, "Well, it's been taught that we're made in his image." And I'm like, "I don't think God has a belly button or nipples. I'm not hip on that. I don't believe it." That's exactly what I told him. He said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Well, I think if there is a God, then he would probably look like we look when our bodies fall, when this thing is over." And as Forrest Gump said, and then God showed up because he had a big picture window in his living room with a big oak or a maple, I can't remember. And this oak started to pulse. And then the room started to pulse. This lucent lavender light. And he went to say something, and I grabbed his leg. And I said, wait. And I don't know how long I sat there, but when I got my senses back about me, I said, mission accomplished, John. I'm a believer. And it really did. It changed me. It didn't make me sinless, of course, but it changed my perception of my place in the world and what the world really was. And it was a place of God. But then you really start to look at the misery that's all around, and John and I talked about that too. He said, that's Satan. The enemy is always working against the good of God.
Yes, sir.
And especially in these times right now. It is never more evident to me that the enemy is trying to take over, especially our country.
So I hate to interrupt you, but I have to.
No, that's fine.
So you said something.
You asked for it.
I did. And you're not getting paid. You said something right there that kind of makes sense to me. I know I told you briefly, one of my good friends, Kenny Finnegan, got killed on his motorcycle on June 1st. And, Kelly and I, my other co-host, we did an episode that we decided not to air because we talked about Kenny. And it was very emotional. And we both sat there and said that, we both believe in God, but we're angry at God right now. And what you just said is something I think is very poignant, because I forgot that Satan is part of the picture. Like, I was blaming everything on God. And I still do. I mean, I'm working through it. I want a reason. I want to know why. If this is the plan, why him? I've survived 3 motorcycle accidents, 2 car accidents. Why not me?
Because you're supposed to be here.
That's part of it. And I think, like I said, I think a lot of times people like me, or that have a thought process like me, that want logic, want black and white, want answers. The first thing we do is we blame God. That's the first thing we do, because if this is God's plan, then he controls all, she controls all. And it's a very valid point that we have to remember that Satan is always trying to fight with whatever your God is. So it's not, maybe it's going to make me think a little differently, because I've never thought about it that way before. I've never thought that maybe it's not God's fault, maybe it's Satan's fault.
It is Satan's fault, because we live in a fallen world, and the love of God is there, the support of Christ, the love of Christ is there,
Praise Jesus.
but it is a fallen world. And as soon as people come to that understanding that they can lean on the strength of the Lord, understand that, that there is a place afterwards. I pray to God your friend was saved, that there is a place of everlasting love where all the questions kind of get answered,
So I've always said that we're not going to talk about religion on this show, but I think this is very important. I think what you're saying is very important, because I'm not an atheist, right? I believe in God, believe in the devil. I don't believe in heaven and hell. I don't believe that you're judged in that way, that if you're bad, you're going here. If you're good, you're going here. I think we all go to the same place. There's just a upstairs and a downstairs, and your actions determine whether or not you get to sit in the high rise or whether you get to sit in the basement.
that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah, I've always been a
Agree
little
to disagree kind of thing,
Yeah.
Everybody can have their own
Yeah,
Of course.
thoughts, yeah.
I've always been different that way. I've always been different in a lot of ways. You know that. This is a difficult conversation for me, because I was soured to religion very young. I had a mother who was domineering and Bible thumping and pushing me towards the church and not caring what I thought, not letting me have my own opinions and my own thoughts. So as I got older, I pushed back and I pushed away from the church. Like I said, I believe in God. I am a Christian, but I haven't gone to church except for weddings and funerals in probably 25 years. it's difficult, like you said, with everything that's going on in the world right now. You know, people like me with my mentality are automatically thinking like, why is God doing this? Why is this happening? You know, what's controlling this, right? So when I went through recovery, when I started my recovery, I had to start looking inside more, right? I had to start looking at what I was doing to cause these problems, what was going on with me that was leading me to make these bad decisions and have these bad results. And in the end, it's became very clear that it's my fault because of what I was doing, that my life was going in the way it was. It wasn't because God wasn't answering my prayers. It wasn't because God was being vindictive. It was because I was a dumbass and I chose to live a dumbass life. And since then, I have, you know, for example, with the podcast, you know, I've been able to come outside myself more and look at myself from the outside.
Sure.
So I would like to pose this question. For someone who is struggling with their faith like me, a believer in spirituality, but not a believer in formalized religion, what would you tell someone like me to try to help me understand more about what it's really about?
Well, I would answer that by saying, if you want to get to know the Lord, you have to study the Word. If you want, like so many people, well, who was it that said every atheist has a God-shaped hole in their heart? If you feel that way, then the best way to do that is to get to know who the Lord is. And, you know, I have a number of very liberal atheist friends who rail against religion and the Bible and so forth. And I'm like, have you ever actually sat down and read it? Even if you're the most confirmed atheist, the Bible is full of the most amazing, it's like I said, it's the greatest story ever told. It has got the most timely wisdom ever. And especially if you get into the New Testament, then you get to know who Christ was. Yes. And that really, I mean, even if you're just doing it as a student and not somebody who's seeking the Lord, you can learn so much. And this thing about the Ten Commandments down in Louisiana, I love the governor's argument. He said the Ten Commandments form the basis of modern law. It's the root of modern law. And if you're going to study law, then shouldn't you study the roots? And I think that's a good start. But that, as an aside. But that's how I'd answer that question. And I'll tell you, if you're interested in a police story, I took care of, and still to this day, I just saw him on Saturday, take care of a cop who came on the job in 1974.
That's the year I was born.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd be happy to hear that. But he was a tough Irish screw. And he was one of those guys who was a hard-drinking, tough, angry cop. If you looked at him the wrong way, it was a different style of policing back then, and you didn't mouth off to this guy. But he took a liking to me for whatever reason. And one day, it was about probably 2000, I'm like, hey, Dave, how you doing, da-da-da. He's like, how come you're always so effing happy? I'll be polite. I said, well, Dave, Jesus loves me. I mean, what's to be mad about?
Amen.
He's like, I don't go for any of that crap, 12 years of Catholic school and all this. I said, Dave, if you knew the Lord, maybe you wouldn't be such a miserable bastard all the time. And, and I said, Dave, let's go to church. I said, there's a great church down in the north side called Allegheny Alliance. I said, I love the pastor there. He's a patient of mine. He's like, I don't know about all that. And, you know, it's just another one of those crazy stories. And I've got so many more. But he agreed, and we were going to go to lunch afterwards. And wouldn't you know that Pastor Rock was preaching on redemption. And that was Dave's problem. He thought he was unredeemable. He thought he was too dirty, had done too many bad things. said too many hateful things. And so he rejected the Lord. Well, I took a peek at him out of the corner of my eye, and he was like, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
So he declined lunch. He said, I don't want to go to lunch. I said, okay, Dave, it's okay. And he came back into my office 2 weeks later, and he basically said the same thing. Mission accomplished. I've accepted the Lord.
That's fantastic.
Oh,
Praise the Lord. Let's go.
Oh, I saw rock, and I was like, I get it completely now why you are a pastor. I'm like, God, does it get any better than that? And he was very, very happy. Well, Dave went on to become the head of security of a church out in Bethel Park. He was a member of the men's choir, and he was in Bible study. And I must tell you, I have never seen a transformation in a human being like I did Dave. It was just like this concrete wall of anger just melted right in front of my eyes. And I mean, it's been 25 years at least since then, and I still have never heard him speak in anger. I mean, he was always just such an angry, bitter person. But as an aside, it's kind of funny. He decided to work. Now, this is a big, tough, red-headed Irish, hard-drinking cop. He decided he was going to do the detail at the Pegasus Lounge. Remember that place? The
Yes, I do.
Gay bar. He goes, they nicknamed me Hun Bun. I'm like, Hun Bun? He goes, yeah, he goes, every time I walk in there, they're all like, hi, Hun Bun. And he's like, how you doing, fellas? How about a cup of coffee? Whatever. But anyhow, that's Dave's story. I'm sorry, none of my stories seem to be
They're
very
very,
short.
That story was awesome.
they're very interesting though. I mean, so like Kelly and I always relate things back to recovery and to our addictions. And,
He quit drinking too, by the way.
yeah, it's amazing what happens when you stop putting poison in your body. Because I know when you met me, I was, like I said, I was a tough kid, angry all the time, bitter all the time. I think every time I came into your office, I was more jammed up because I was tense, and since I stopped drinking, like my thought processes have slowed down. My mannerisms have slowed down. My need to do things quickly has slowed down. So, I mean, you've seen a lot of different people coming in and out of your practice over the years.
Amen.
When it comes to like the people that that are in addiction, what kind of changes do you see physically in someone who cuts out booze and cuts out whatever they're doing?
Well, I think it probably relates back more to their mentality and their ability to deal with their emotions. So in chiropractic, we talk about stress. And, back problems are the number one crippler of all Americans. It's the number one reason for doctor's visits. It's the number one reason for Social Security disability, primarily because people do not take care of their back and neck when they're feeling well. They think, well, I don't have pain. But the degeneration process is silent most of the time. Sometimes symptoms pop up, your body deals with it, it adapts, but the decay goes on. Well, what's the progenitor of that is stress. And stress comes at you three different ways. It comes at you physically, duty belts, tactical vest, fights with bad guys, horrible arrests, death. These are all very physical and mental kinds of stresses. There's also emotional stress. So physical, mental, and emotional stress has a common effect on the human body. And it is contracture of the muscles, especially around the spine. If you look at somebody who's under a lot of mental or emotional stress, how are they sitting? Or you might see them doing something like this. And they're very tense. So when you're having mental and emotional issues that are leading to you abusing drugs and alcohol, it's like the perfect storm. Their bodies are like this. They think they're relaxed because they've mentally kind of ambushed those emotional mental centers, but you can't lie to the body. So very often when I see people who have made that commitment, they've gone through rehab, and there haven't been a whole lot of them in my career, but I've noticed a difference in their physicality, how easy they are to adjust.
Yeah.
Seems to be a lot easier than when they're coming in and I'm trying to get things to move for them.
Well, I mean, I've had some pretty constant back pain, for years and years and years. And, I even went as far as getting radio frequency ablation
Yes.
done about 2.5, 3 years ago. And that's where they stick needles down your spine all the way in, and then the needles have electrodes within them that burn the nerve endings in the nerve bed. And it's supposed to give you temporary relief up to like 18 months or something like that. And I did that, went through 4 procedures, did all that, and it was okay. But when I stopped drinking, 3 months later, like my back pain went from a 10 to like a 0.5.
Yeah.
Like I can sit in the truck for 400 miles now without, being in pain, like crippled over. So, I mean, I definitely know that from my experience, there's an anti-inflammatory
That too.
recovery. There's an inflammation recovery where, without the alcohol, I don't have as much inflammation.
You're also probably eating better because when you're getting all those calories through alcohol, your craving for food diminishes.
Well, let's just bringing that up. So when I was drinking, I was eating like once a day, and I was planning my diet so that when I got home at night, I could drink a half gallon and drink as much as I want, 2,000-3,000 calories a day. So when I went to treatment, I was the only person there that, like, next to the heroin and the opioid, I was the only alcoholic that lost weight because I was actually eating again. I was eating 3 meals a day instead of eating once and then drinking all my calories. Like, I had planned my days around how I could get all my booze in me and not get fat. So it's definitely, there's so many things about recovery, and there's so many things about what you bring in your experiences, with the chiropractic and, talking about religion. What drew me to you in the beginning was the fact that you worked with a lot of police officers. Mm-hmm. You came in and you talked to the academy and you talked about, what you do. You're very different from.
I've been told that.
You're very different from a lot of, I mean, granted you jump out of planes for fun, but you're a lot
Guilty.
different from,
That's cool.
in general, I find chiropractic to be much more constant than regular medicine. Like when I go to the chiropractor, I feel better.
Sure.
When I don't go to the chiropractor, I feel worse. It's not like going to the doctor. You go to the doctor, they pump you full of pills, and it's practicing medicine for a reason. They haven't figured it out yet.
Sure.
So now that you've been doing this for, 3/4 of your life,
33 years.
what are some of the things, if you were to run into somebody that was trying to start their own practice or start their own business, what would be some advice you could give them on how to make that happen?
Well, get a mentor. I've had a number of mentors in my life. Unfortunately, one of them, well, not unfortunately, my number one was my dad, but I lost him when I was 19, very suddenly. And so I ended up learning about different authors and different public speakers. And some of the names include Dale Carnegie. So when you're still very angry about how things went in your life, you tend to have that anger-based personality. So one of the first books I read was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And you ever notice when you're in conversations with many people, all they do is talk about themselves. Mm-hmm. One of the principles I learned in that book was be more interested in the other person. And so there's a number of principles in this book. But to become a real people person, you have to be more interested in the other person than you are explaining who you are. So another author that I read, and I listened to so many of his, was this guy changed my life. This guy changed my life. If there was one person in my adult life that changed it more than any other, it's a guy by the name of Jim Rohn, R-O-H-N. And Jim Rohn was an amazing guy. He grew up on a farm. He got married when he was 25. He didn't have a game plan. He was going broke. He was married. He had a kid. And a guy took him under his wing by the name of Earl Schoaf. And Earl Schoaf was the first multi-level marketing guy. And he taught Schoaf all of the principles of success in living, personally, professionally. And Rohn became a millionaire. And then he lost it all because he hadn't become a millionaire in his consciousness. See, this is why people hit the Powerball go broke, because they're not millionaires in their minds. But if you have a mentor that can teach you these concepts and principles, so I got obsessed with Jim Rohn. I listened to everything he wrote me or said to me in the form of lectures and books. And I applied his principles to my life, and we have an amazing life. We really do. We made it, and in a happy state of mind, not miserable. You know, not one of these people who are like consumed with the idea of owning more property and having more money, but rather having a full, balanced, kind of robust life. But it takes study. You have to be dedicated. Another one was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you've ever heard of that book. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the whole entire concept was, do you work to get out of the rat race, or do you play it safe and stay in the rat race, retire with a retirement plan and with benefits and all this? So that book changed my life too. Mark Victor Hansen was another guy. And you can see all these people's stuff online now, which is incredible. We had cassette tapes back then. 8-track.
John, you know what those are?
Yes.
I thought John died over in the corner.
You remember 8-tracks, I bet.
That was right at right when I was about 3-4 years old. I remember 8-tracks.
You sure?
I've never used an 8-track.
Go home.
But the idea is, if you want to be successful, you have to have a purpose. And as I said before, when I decided to become a chiropractor, that was it. I quit everything. I had to, as I said before, I had to fire my friends, and 100% of my focus was earning a living, paying my bills, and becoming a chiropractor. There was nothing outside of it. I had a girlfriend. She's always mad at me because I was either working or studying. But then you add in some of these other elements. Okay, I have a purpose. Now, how do I refine myself? How do I become more cultured? How do I become more educated? How do I become more successful? How do I manage my money better? And the resources out there are just incredible, but it starts with a purpose. That's the thing, and I think a lot of people who are still using and abusing, they don't have a purpose in life other than to find the next dose or to find the next drink.
I mean, I'm notoriously lazy. My marriage fell apart, and you knew my ex-wife. It fell apart because of a bunch of reasons, but one of the things is I got in that rat race where it was just about, getting the paycheck, making as much money as I could, blah, 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 not being happy. It took me hitting, I mentioned this last week, there's a shirt by this lady, her website's called Inspiring Sobriety. It said, I didn't know rock bottom had a basement. Right?
That's
and
great.
I saw that shirt, and this is one of her shirts too. But I saw that shirt, and I'm thinking about because in recovery you think about it all the time. You have to, otherwise you slip, especially in the first few years. I'm only got a year, so I'm still new to it. And I'm sitting there thinking, what if I was a better person? What if I stopped giving a shit about what I wanted all the time? And you mentioned that when you were talking about the books. I think it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad was the one you were talking about.
That's a good one.
And even John knows, because John knew me when I was in the heart of my addiction. Since I've gotten sober and started to live my life again, I've become more open to people. I've become more open to ideas. I've taken chances.
Sure.
You know, like doing this is a chance for me because I'm a very private person. Even before that,
Same.
when I was still in addiction, you know, I walked into work one day and quit as a police officer. And the only thing I had to fall back on was my CDL, driving a truck. So I gave up, you know, a $100,000 a year job and a retirement on a whim. You know, and looking back on it, it was the right decision,
Sure.
but the reasons weren't right.
Well, I'm going to take it back to what you had said about your marriage, about being in a rat race and you know, so on and so forth. I think you could probably break it down even a little bit further than that. And the word is neglect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that Jim Rohn taught me, was that relationships fail, generally speaking, because of neglect.
Now, that's, if you don't mind, I neglected my own mental health and my own well-being initially, and I think that's where all that started for
Sure.
me, because I wasn't able to deal with myself. I wasn't happy with myself. I didn't like myself, but I didn't know it. And then that led to me neglecting.
Sure. So what happens when you neglect your car?
Falls apart.
What happens when you neglect your bank account?
I don't want to think about it, but you go broke.
What happens when you neglect your, well, anything? Relationships, health, car. It can be broken down to one word, by and large, and that is neglect. That's what causes everything to fall apart. So how do you fix that? Well, you make it a priority to start paying attention. So I have lots of patients who neglect their health, mental health and their physical health. And so you start, where do you start? It's the old adage is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You have to start with small steps. And then eventually they start to pick up speed, and then they become habits. And then your habit of neglect becomes a habit of improvement.
Openness and acceptance.
Well, it becomes one where you're building instead of it eroding.
Yeah, because
And-
I mean, I not that, you know, I always like to talk about myself, but, you know,
I get it.
my life was falling apart all around me for years. You know, even when I was coming to you in, you know, the early 2000s, my life was falling apart. I was just holding on by a thread, and the thread was the job and the booze. You know, if I had my job and if I had the booze, I could get through anything. You know, and, you know, you said something very important, that you just have to start somewhere. You have to have that purpose and start somewhere. And for a lot of addicts, I think they can agree, and a lot of alcoholics, you can agree that we have to start with ourselves. We have to start by being self-aware of what we're doing to others and what we're doing to ourselves. I think the moment that we realize that the substances do nothing but kill us slowly and kill everything we touch, you know, relationships, jobs, you know, it just destroys everything around you, and we allow it to happen because there's that what if factor. This road is so dark and scary. I'm afraid to go this way, but I know I can keep going this way, and I can survive, I can function, I can make it. But there's no happiness in surviving.
Exactly.
You know,
There's happiness and purpose, though.
Yeah.
And if that purpose involves doing things in the name of the Lord, well, then it does, to me, it doesn't get any better than that. But what if you don't have a purpose? Then what? Your purpose is to find a purpose. And how do you find your purpose? Well, you have to be open, and you have to study, and you have to look. I mean, and you have to be able to be, what am I trying to say? You've got to be open to the potential. And, you know, when young people ask me about that, well, what do I do? What do you love to do? I mean, besides drink. What do you love to do?
I don't even think we love drinking.
Well,
It
I love people. Well, then you need to go into a profession where you're working with people. Well, I love numbers. Well, then maybe you need to look into a degree in math or accounting. If that's really what trips your wire, I hate math myself.
So do I.
I can't stand it. I love people. But, and what, again, once you get rooted in that purpose, and it takes off, it very often becomes to the exclusion of everything else. I never thought about drinking when I made that decision. As a matter of fact, I did not begin. I drink occasionally. I don't think I had an alcoholic drink all the way through chiropractic school, and not until I was well in my 30s, because it didn't occur to me. Because I had something else that I was just laser beamed on. And when I opened up this practice, I was down here 15, 16 hours a day. I was canvassing the neighborhoods, introducing myself to everybody, the cops, the firemen, everything. I'm like, come get adjusted.
Now, were you involved in any like 12-step programs, if you don't mind me asking, when you were dealing with your situation, starting your journey?
I tried, but it wasn't for me. My thing was like, I know what to do, and that is to say, light beamed on what it is that I want to achieve, and not be around anybody who's partying.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was really hard because I'd lost my family, and then I had to fire all my friends. And I mean, it was a very challenging, very lonely time for me for a very long time. Of course, all that's changed now. I've got 3 beautiful children, my lovely wife. But if you're willing to put in the work and you're willing to do what it takes and stay focused and find your joy in other things like jumping out of airplanes or taking martial arts, I did that for years. Shooting trap is one of my loves of my life. I love shooting trap. And stay focused on that stuff.
I mean, I think, I love what you're saying. It really is another way to look at things because, my experiences, and I'm sure a lot of people suffering with addiction, like we are incapable of logical thinking. Everything is based off of emotion. It's based off of what we're feeling. The drink makes that feeling go away. The drug makes that feeling go away. And I didn't realize how illogical I was for the longest time. Like, I'm talking decades of illogical thinking. Like, things that made sense to me when I was drinking no longer make sense to me. You talked about how, you, with not drinking, you just had to not be around people that were doing it and you knew what to do. I was the opposite. I didn't know what to do. It was like I was a child when I got sober. And at that end, at that transition, at what we call rock bottom, which is where change happens, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a game plan. So for me, 12 steps, rehab, that was the program. That was the plan. That was do these things, and you have the ability to stay clean.
And it's a great program. There's so much out there for people but you have to want it.
Yeah.
You have to.
You have to put every effort into it.
That comes when you hit the basement. My story was a little bit different. I didn't hit the basement. I mean, I did hit the basement. My friend took me in. I was about one step away from being on the street. But like I said, once I made that decision to become a chiropractor, it was just a game changer. It's like enough. That's enough.
So in your mind, the most important thing for someone, if they want to succeed in life, that's being sober, being clean, being happy, having the job you want, having the career you want, having the wife you want, having the life you want. It starts with a purpose.
It starts with a purpose, but it also means giving back to the community too.
Which you do a ton of.
Yes. We have a charitable foundation. I do work in the DR, healthcare. And that's what makes it so meaningful. I mean, it's if you find meaning and purpose, it kind of takes, for me anyway, it took away that need, because I could have easily fallen back into it, but it did. With the love of the Lord in my heart, I mean, I was one of the fortunate ones. I really was, because I've had a number of friends who have drank themselves to death, and it's horrible. But there's a lot of help. There's a lot of support out there for people. There's a lot of resources out there for people. But you have to want it. That's kind of the bottom line.
I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we started today with what my health was like when I went to treatment. You know, my liver was fine, but my kidneys were failing because
Right.
of trying to process, 64 ounces of booze every day. You know, it's amazing. I never knew these things about you. I mean, granted, we had patient-client relationship, but we still talk, and it's amazing what you've,
I'm sorry.
it's amazing what you've done.
I have news for you. Nobody knows this story except my oldest and closest of friends. So I really, I thought long and hard.
I
before
thank you
said
for
that.
sharing this. I really do, because this is why we're here. This is why John, me and Kelly, Keith, this is why we do this.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, and I'm not just stroking your ego, you've been great to me since I've known you. You've been amazing.
Thank you.
I would like to call you a friend, because we always
Absolutely.
talk about my life and what I was doing.
Of course.
But as a doctor and as a professional, you're an amazing human being.
Thank you.
And to know that we share this quality, we share this journey, maybe different roads, but we share this, it brings us a little bit closer, I think.
Absolutely.
And it really makes me happy that we do this.
I think what you're doing here is fantastic. Again, I am a very intensely personal man.
Yeah.
I just don't. Like I said, I'd rather talk about you. I'd rather talk about what your kid's doing. I'd rather talk about how your business is doing or whatever. So it was not easy to sit down with you, but I believe in what you're doing. And so there you go.
That, I don't know, John, how's that make you feel?
This is incredible, man.
I mean, because we've been
Hey,
struggling.
yeah.
We've been struggling to get this thing going. Everybody looks at viewers and everybody looks at followings, and this today just makes it blatantly clear to me that I don't give a shit how many people watch this, because I get to hear this story and I get to see a new side of someone that I've known for almost 2 decades.
Sure.
And I have so much respect for you professionally, but now to know that you've done it with this monkey on your back, this thing you had to go through to get there, it shows that everything's possible. Just get rid of the substances. Get rid of the dumb shit you're putting in your body. Because without purpose, without a clear head, we're never going to succeed.
And you know the story about Thomas Edison and relative to your podcast. And I've heard some of it as legend, but there is a bust down in the Cardello building with Thomas Edison. And below it says, "Mr. Edison, are you going to fail to make an incandescent light bulb 5,000 times?" And Edison replied, "I didn't fail to make an incandescent light bulb 5,000 times. I learned 5,000 ways not to invent an incandescent light bulb." So if he would have stopped there and said, "Screw it, I'm not doing this anymore," I mean, eventually somebody would have come along and invented the thing, but you just keep hammering at it, and eventually it'll take. Some pumps need to be primed more, that's all.
Well, my pump was primed with whiskey and vodka for about 34 years. So,
I hear you.
I mean, honestly, I really can't add to anything you said. I mean, this has been amazing. Just
Thank you.
maybe one thing before we go. What is your opinion, this is a big question, on the state of law enforcement in this day and age?
Relative to Pittsburgh?
Relative to Pittsburgh or, nationally, whatever you see. Because I always like to find out what people think about all the stuff that's going on now.
I have been through, I think, 4 chiefs in my day. I've never seen our police department more elated and men more confident in women than when Nate Harper was put
I
in
agree
as chief.
100%.
I have never seen people more dejected and more humiliated than when Bill Peduto was mayor.
I mean, he hated the police department. We all know that.
He hated the police department, and I'll never forget a Zone 3 officer bumped into a vehicle over on Carson Street, I think it was, and went to a supervisor with an expired license. He said, "My license expired a week ago." Supervisor. no problem. Well, it went to Karen Dixon, who was the Zone 3 commander, who took it over to headquarters. And the decision was made to arrest him. He was booked in the Allegheny County Jail in his uniform for having an expired driver's license. I had never seen men so low at that point, knowing that anything that they do outside of a 911 call could get them fired potentially for making a mistake. And that was brought onto us by a famous national organization, who I won't repeat their name. But that being said, I think the corner is starting to turn. I take care of law enforcement from municipal through city, county, federal, state, all of them. So I have a very good sense of what is happening there. And people are getting more confident, especially in the city. Ed Gainey has turned out to be pro-police, to his credit. And Larry Scarato, I have not heard anything bad from any officer, and I've probably seen 70 or 80 different city police officers since the time he took off or was appointed. So I'm confident. There's my short answer.
Well, I'm kind of on the opposite end. I still think we've got further in the hole to go.
Oh, we've got a ways to go,
You
sure.
know, I don't feel confident that the state of law enforcement in Pittsburgh is on the rise mentally, like for mental well-being and having officers be able to do what they would do. Because when I started in 2007, it was go out and arrest every bad guy you could.
Yeah.
Now it's try not to do anything.
911
because-
calls.
911 calls with this, the new staffing hours and how they're light certain days of the week and there's nobody working certain shifts and, it's just, I don't know when they're going to start to realize that the police officers are a valuable possession, not something you can throw away.
I think they're beginning to realize that relative to, say, 2020, 2019, 20.
I said it in the last podcast, if you got hired after 2020, if I was a cop now, I wouldn't trust you. Because when I went through in 2007, like, everybody had your back. Every officer had your back. You knew that you were backed up. Now, with the way things are going and having difficulty staffing the departments, they're hiring less than optimal candidates.
Yeah, but they can't find them.
I know.
When you took the test, I bet you, what,
About 1,000?
1,000? In 2015, there were 3,000. And now, if they still do it, they administer the civil service test out at the hockey rink in Shenley Park. That's how few people were showing up for the civil service test because of the atmosphere that was brought on by that particular national organization, who actually took the proceeds and went off and broke up their donations and bought mansions, but we won't talk about that.
I mean, the city started going downhill, the Jordan Miles incident back in the day, and then there's been numerous incidents since then, right? There's been numerous things that have happened in the city, and more recently, in the last, I'd say, 5 years, in my opinion, it's a lack of training, it's a lack of hiring people with the right mindset. To be an officer in a busy city, a small, busy city like Pittsburgh, you need to be able to react, you need to be able to think on your feet, you need to be able to make good decisions, you need to be able to follow through on your decisions, and you need to make that hard decision when to use force and when not to use force. I've seen so many things happen in the city that if those officers were just willing to do something more than what they were doing, the use of force continuum. Officers are taught step by step, this is what you do. But they forget that you can jump a level based on the scenarios, based on the circumstances. And it just seems like, to me, law enforcement is still teaching people in the academies that don't do this, don't do that, you're going to get sued, you're going to lose your job, you're going to get fired, you're going to go to jail. And it's like, it always comes back to the same thing. If you follow procedure, follow policy, follow law, you're going to be okay.
Sure.
But it just seems like now it's so easy for a department to go like this and throw you away, like your toilet paper. I mean, maybe that's just me, being ex-law enforcement, but I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Well, I have seen it change, and I can tell you that. And it's just by the sheer volume of police officers that we see in our North Side office. And very much have a pulse on the level of, what's the word I'm searching for? Level of confidence, the level of security. And that has turned the corner somewhat.
I mean,
And
Hank Gainey has been a surprise.
he has been a
So
pleasant
much better than Bill
surprise.
Peduto.
Oh, my God. Well, Satan would be better
What's
than Bill.
Peduto doing now? Like ruining another city?
No, he's teaching out at CMU, from what I understand,
awesome.
and
I'm
getting
not-
hammered at Cappy's bar.
I am not going to go into any stories, but anyway, yes.
Yes.
I've
So,
heard that
so,
rumor.
so but I have labeled myself an apocalyptimist. And if you don't know what an apocalyptimist is, it's a guy who knows that everything is going to shit, but somehow it's going to turn out okay. That's kind of how I see what's going on with law enforcement. So I look at it nationally too. So I look at Minneapolis, I look at Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles. People are starting to rebel against these woke DAs that are releasing felons on no cash bail. You saw what happened out in the East End with Xander, what's his name? Did you hear about that one?
Mm-hmm.
A pound and a half of fentanyl, and he let the guy go with no bail, and he disappeared. Ornstein, yeah, that's it. Yeah. A pound and a half of fentanyl they caught this guy with. One of my Port Authority cops is one of the guys who put the handcuffs on that guy. He was in the following Saturday after he let him go. He was furious because that was a great collar, man.
Yeah, I mean, you figure a pound and a half of fentanyl is thousands of dollars when cut with whatever they're going to cut it with.
It was so pure, it was released that it could have killed everybody in Allegheny County 3 times over.
And this is another problem.
And
we
Kim
face.
Clark didn't dismiss him and just prohibit him from ever. She said, "You're taking 2 weeks off the bench." What kind of decision making is this?
I've always said that there's no accountability in the justice system except for the law enforcement officers. Judges aren't held accountable. Attorneys aren't held accountable. You know, it's only the officers that are held accountable. You know, you could get a case thrown out because you didn't dot an I or cross a T.
Sure.
But they had, what the hell was this guy? A socialist judge. It was right at the end of my career. You know, we would get search warrants for phones on overdoses when people pass, so we could get all the information on the phones. And this one socialist judge wouldn't approve the warrants, said that there wasn't enough. And you would be like, the person has no standing, they're dead. And he would not approve the warrants. You would have to go back with a new warrant in the next shift.
I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name, though. He's off the bench now.
Yeah, he was, I mean, and that's the problem with the entire justice system right now. You know, it's every cog in that wheel is spinning different directions. Mm-hmm. And they're not working together. And the law enforcement officers are paying the price.
Sure.
You know, financially, you know, the city finally came up to like, I don't know, $78,000 a year or whatever. But these officers are just struggling. You know,
Sure.
like you say you see it more. You're still involved with a lot of them, which I could get. I worry about their mental health. You know, I think the mental health, the physical safety, I don't care about money when it comes to law enforcement anymore because I'm not doing it. But I worry about the mental health and the physical health because I was undiagnosed depression, anxiety, PTSD for years. And it almost cost me my life. Of my own doing.
Sure.
You know, not on the job, but I was also not there like I should be some of the time when I was at work. So I worry that effect is going to linger.
Well, I think, and of course, talking is what helps. My CIT classes that I taught for many years for the county involved, it was a week-long mental health. Did you do CIT?
I did CIT with Patty Palooka.
Yes. And so I thought that was a fantastic program. Another group is taking it over. I'm hoping that I can get my class back with this new group. But for how many years? 15 years? No, 12 years I taught that. But the 5 points of 5 points chiropractic were, you know, get adjusted regularly because it helps reduce stress. Stay out of McDonald's and Taco Bell. Go to Subway. You can get fresh vegetables and lean meats, right? And to what we were speaking, stay away from jagoffs, right? Stay away from the news. Stay away from all that toxic stuff, okay? Get enough sleep, all right? Get your 8 hours of sleep and exercise regularly. These are what form the core of my practice. And a big part of CIT, well, not a huge part, was if you're having problems, go talk to somebody, because talk is the way. I mean, all the clinical research proves that when people talk through their problems with somebody who's a competent clinical psychologist or psychiatrist, that it improves their mental outlook and their emotional outlook. But in policing, there is a stigma that's still there about, if I go talk to somebody, I'm going to look weak, and people are going to think that I'm defective. But that is not the case. I think that too has turned a corner somewhat. It's not like it was back in my brother's day.
Well, I mean, it's tough. It was tough for me. I tried to get sober in 2017. I think it's very tough for first responders to take that first step towards recovery because of that stigma, like, oh, they're going to think I'm weak. They're going to think I'm fucked up. They're going to think that there's something wrong with me. People aren't going to trust me. But nobody has to know. You know, there are HIPAA laws, and you go to your apartment or whatever, and you go to your healthcare provider, say, hey, I have an issue. I need to do this. FMLA, it protects you 12 weeks.
Yes.
Medical or personal leave. So all you have to do is contact the HR department, tell them what's going on. Nobody else has to know. And I didn't know that when I tried to get clean the first time.
Right.
And then, not wanting to go to AA because I didn't want to talk in front of people that I didn't know if I could trust.
Right.
I think that's what's really hard for first responders is that, held to a different standard. And how can I share what I'm dealing with people that I may see on the street someday? But there are programs out there. There are programs out there that do not, that do allow you to tell those things to people like you, like the VAFR at the place that I went to, which was a veterans and first responder program.
Well, fortunately, that too, we don't talk a whole lot about that with my officers unless I can visibly see that there's something on his mind. Sometimes you'll tell your chiropractor things that you won't even tell your bartender, So some of these guys will open up. But it seems to me that it's getting a little less stigmatic than it once was. And I don't know how these guys, quite frankly, can't not talk to people. You hear the stories, like that little 6-week-old out in the East End. Did you hear about that? I won't get into the gory details of it, but it was the most horrific story that I have heard in years. And so these homicide guys and these crime scene guys have got to deal with that. And, I get it about being tough and being grizzled, but, and I did time in a morgue. I've seen the most horrible, terrible, awful things that you can see done to a human being. But when it comes to little kids, that affects you. It does, and they can't tell me that it doesn't. And so, at any rate, we've had some conversations along those lines. Look, you should really talk to somebody. Oh, no, I'm fine. Don't hear that like I used to. My brother's partner got shot, and I'm fine. I'm not. He almost got killed. This kind of thing. It's a different attitude today. I've been seeing police officers now for 31 years, and the mentality in today's officer is diametric to what it was 31 years ago. 31 years ago, these guys would decompress with a half a pack of Camels and half a bottle of Calvert. Now they're decompressing with kettlebell workouts. They're coming into my office proactively instead of being carried in. It is a different mentality, but there is a long way to go with it.
Well, I appreciate your honesty today. I really am glad you came in today.
Me too.
We're going to get this wrapped up because I know you got to be somewhere.
Okay.
If there's anything you want to say to the audience, now's your time. Maybe tell them where your practice is.
Oh, well, I practice in the north side Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I practice in Bethel on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, 6 days a week.
You have a website?
These days I'm going to slow down. Yeah, it's theback.net. And my email address is what? Casey@theback.net. Ha, get it?
Yeah.
I thought it was clever. Well, thank you for having me.
Definitely, definitely. Any advice to the viewers?
Yeah. Read, study, become smarter today than you were yesterday. Find a way to become healthier today than you were yesterday, and so on and so forth. They used to call it CANI, C-A-N-I. It means constant and never-ending improvement. And if you can make that a personal philosophy and go to church on Sunday, I think you'll be better off.
We'll work on the second part of it. John, you got anything to say?
Thank you for being here today. It was fantastic.
I think this is
thank you.
John's favorite show so far.
Yeah, absolutely.
He didn't say
It was
it.
great.
He didn't say a word. That means he
Dialed
enjoyed
in.
it.
I was dialed in.
Well, thank you.
SteelCityRoundTable@gmail.com if you guys have any ideas, if you have topics, if you want to be on the show. Casey, thanks again for talking to us.
You're welcome.
Absolutely incredible story. Love to hear what God's done for you in your life. And
Amen.
yeah, it's fantastic. But Mark, over to you.
Well, thank you again, Casey. I'd like to have you back at some point if you're okay with that down
Sure.
the road.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is the Steel City Roundtable, folks. This is what we do. Everybody's story deserves to be told, and today was amazing. Just remember, help is out there. You're never alone. You just have to be willing to see the help and ask for it. Eliminate those bad elements in your life, the booze, the alcohol, bad friends, people, places, and things. And Kelly, we miss you. See you next week. Just remember, there's always a seat here at the Steel City Roundtable for you, so reach out. We're always here. Love you guys.